back again with another edition, another podcast. Just want to say thanks to all my subscribers. I haven't made a podcast for a while, a vid, a vlog, a blog, whatever you want to call it. I haven't done one, but I'm here and I've got an important subject now that I want to get onto, and it's a topic that's been coming up a lot in the last few weeks. Just from my own perspective, and it's the story of the Dogman. This relates to a man called David Paulides, Pallides, missing cases 411. I suggest you have a look at that. He's an ex-detective in America, and he's been basically looking up a lot of cases that have not been able to be solved at all. And it really is a serious thing. There's certain variables that always keep happening. Person goes missing, normally under very strange circumstances. The search parties, the dogs can't find the scent. The cadaver dogs or expert sniffing dogs, and they end up running around in circles. So everyone's baffled, basically. I also want to do a shout out to Insane Disappearances and his channel and the work he's doing. He's been an inspiration in this, and his comment section on some of his stuff is absolutely incredible. Some people, they don't just write a comment, they're telling a story about what's happened to them or what's happened to their friend. And this is the stuff that's really interesting, and I'll get onto that in a little bit. I'm also looking down here because I want to mention Dead Man Talking 666, DMT 666, great narrator, and he's basically doing a lot of stories about these as well. Now, the reason that I want to do this is to make a distinction. And the only way I can really do that is to bring another name into this, who I suggest you really start to take aware of on YouTube, and that's a guy called Cundiff. He's got his own channels. He's got two, one on Sasquatch and one on Dogman, and he's an expert on them. Now, see, what's happening is Paulides is bringing up these cases, and they're factual, and he can't even make an honest appraisal of what it is, because he doesn't know what it is. And if he's basically saying because he's an ex-policeman, he doesn't want to speculate. All he wants to do is bring up the facts to help the law enforcement try and get to the bottom of it, but they can't, and it's been going on for hundreds of years. Whereas Victor Cundiff, he is an expert in Dogmen, and what he's basically saying is that they're existing in the wilds like Sasquatch, and they're actually interacting with each other at different times. He's had reports that there have been fights with a Sasquatch and a Dogman. Remember, Dogman go to like 7 to 8 foot, and apparently the Dogman normally wins the fights. They're not as strong as Sasquatch, but they're a lot faster, and they got claws, they got weapons in their hands, and they've obviously got elongated jaws, much bigger than the Sasquatch sort of human, sort of ape style jaw. You know, even though the Sasquatch are a lot bigger and stronger, they cannot stand up to one of these Dogmen. It's just simple as that. They're just too fast. Now, the reason I brought this up is because a lot of people are now saying it's these Dogmen that are going out to attack people, and I'm not actually sure if that's the case. And what I want to do in this video is make a distinction between A, Dogmen, B, werewolves, and C, Skinwalkers. So looking at Dogmen, what the reports that we get is that there's about 12 different subspecies of them. They range in height from 7 to 8.5 foot. They're sort of either coyote, wolf or dog looking, very long muzzles, very long snouts, really big set of teeth, but the shoulders are different. If you look on a dog, the shoulders are down and more into the body, whereas their shoulders are more back, like our human shoulders basically, and the chest is open. And they're bipedal, they can stand up on their two legs, and they can move very, very quickly. But they are half human as well. And I've only seen a few photos of them, but I haven't heard much about them. I've heard mainly about Sasquatch, so that's a distinction. So apparently we've got that type of being in nature. Now we got what we know, especially here in England, the werewolf. Theories go that a werewolf bites them and a human being, and that human being, when the full moon comes, turns into a werewolf, but not of their own volition. They haven't actually, they don't want to be like that. It's just that they've been afflicted. So somewhere along the line, it brings me back. They've been afflicted by what I'm going to say next, and that's the third distinction, and that is the Skinwalkers. I believe that the Skinwalkers have actually started off this thing of werewolves biting people, but I actually believe that these Skinwalkers are rejected Navajo Indians that have got too much evil in them. They've been outcast, they've been put in some very fearful situations themselves, and they've turned, and what they've done is they've learned from the old Navajo ways of able to shapeshift, able to hypnotise, able to control and manipulate. The ancient Navajo say that the good ones, what they say is they used to shapeshift to help them hunting, and what they would do is they'd bring the hunt in and then change back into themselves, and they'd be normal family people, and they would only use that shape-shifting ability, skinwalking ability, if someone actually came to attack them. Now what they're saying is that these disiluded shamans, these skinwalkers, these evil ones, what they're doing is they're going off performing rituals and either turning themselves or someone else into a skinwalker, and they've got abilities to disappear, they've got abilities to manipulate and manifest portholes to take them all over different parts of the world. And it's also funny as well that the actual, because I asked a few questions on David Paulides' site, and one of the questions that I asked was, you know, when are they most prolific and when are they not? And one of the things that he said in another video is that in February there's nothing. So whoever's doing this, whoever's behind this, they're literally in February, because it's a cold month, they're more or less hibernating. And I can picture like a rejected Navajo tribesman, you know, a skinwalker basically, rejecting into his cave for that month and not doing anything, and either turning into a beast and feasting on these victims, or getting prepared to take these victims back to where they found them. It's all a psychological game, and this is what I think. This is why I brought it up, because people do go missing and people do get murdered, but 90% of the time, at least the family and the friends, they've got some sort of closure, even though it's horrific what's happened. They know their family member or friend has been murdered. They know how it was done. They've been able to bury them. They've been able to grieve for them, and they've been able to let them go. Now imagine if your relative, your son or your daughter got missing 20 years ago, and this is a lot of cases like this. You don't know whether they're alive or they're dead. Just in that flux between those two, and you're going through that every day. That's horrific. That is just torture and torment to the hilt, and emotional torment to the hilt. And it seems that whatever's doing this is doing this on purpose, and they're doing it because they've caused some problem when they were younger with their tribe, and now they're taking it out on everyone else. Basically, they're seeing the rest of humanity as different tribes, and this isn't just happening in America. This is happening in Canada. It's happening in Brazil. Happening in the Canaries. It's even happening in Manchester. certain places around the world, in Asia as well, Norway, there was a case recently where this is going on, and I really wanted just to make this video to let people know what's going on. So going back to David Paulides, an average case is either a young person or an old person, even a middle-aged person, doesn't really matter, but mainly young or old. They go missing, and they're either found near a water or in the water, or they're found in the middle of a boulder field or in the middle of a forest. Normally their trousers have been removed, other clothes that they've had there have been removed, and they've been folded neatly. But what is mystifying about a lot of these cases is that they're not really getting they're not really disappearing in overly hot conditions, and it's very strange that they find the body, but all the clothes are perfectly folded on a pile on the ground. Their shoes are still intact, everything's intact, and they either cannot find the body or they find the body dead, and most of the time the post-mortem cannot actually prove how they died. And for a few weeks now, this is a typical scenarios, and I've been listening to a lot of David Paulides, and I've been baffled myself, and I was just thinking, well, what is going on here? That was until a few days ago when I was on Insane Disappearances channel on YouTube, and again I was reading through his comment section, and I came across a story which to me intuitively felt like there was a lot of answers there. So the story goes, there's 3 mountain bikers, they're racing down a mountain in America. It's a mild day, it's sort of in the 20s, but then they've got water on them, and they've got everything. Now one of the cyclists is really like far ahead of the other guys. I mean, he's like a mile or so ahead of the other guys. And as they come down the mountain, there's a creek there, a small river, and he basically, what he remembers, and very rarely do people actually remember it, and very rarely do people actually want to do regression therapy for it, but somehow this guy was woke enough to explain what had happened to him. Was he was coming down the track, and he's come off his bike, he's come to, and he's now stood next to the river, and he can see what looks like a half man, a half wolf on the margins, growling in a guttural way, and as soon as he saw that beast growling like it did in a certain hypnotizing way, he said he became very, very hot inside, and all he wanted to do was just take his clothes off and drink. In fact, what actually happened was he took all his clothes off, and he said he remembers stacking all of his own clothes in a pile on the bank, but not realising why he would do it. If he was that hot normally, he would just throw his clothes everywhere and go in. And then obviously he had this overwhelming desire to drink water, and he's basically just dived into the water, and he's literally drinking water so much that he's suffocating himself, but he's not actually drowning, as it were. Thankfully, his 2 mates come down on the bank, off the top of the mountain. They see what's happening. They get off their bikes, they jump in there, and they save him, and they bring him to. And I don't know whether it's because he was so full of adrenaline, or just for the weird fact that his friends had found him so soon after this encounter with this skinwalker, that he was able to remember what happened, and he was able actually to talk about it. Because what it seems that happens is, after this happens, this beast then puts a curse on this person. It's almost like a fear blocker that basically says you're not to remember what's happened, but if you do try and remember what's happened, you will feel loads of fear. And obviously it seems to me, talking about it now, this Skinwalker never had the actual time to put this curse onto this mountain biker, because his two friends had caught up with him so far, and the Skinwalker was probably thinking, he's a solitary rider, there's going to be no one around, it will be sorted out. So in a way, just from reading this case, and if it is true, this Skinwalker has been caught out in a sense. Again, it was on the same page as Insane Disappearances. I think it was called Missing 411, the video. There's another story which fascinated me, and it's a story about a mother and the daughters telling the story in the comments. She was basically saying she was going for a walk with her mum in a forest, a normal path, normal sunny day, and they had some friends behind them, and basically, no, sorry, that was another story which I've actually found out was fake, I think. But anyway, so there was no friends with them. They were just in the forest. They had a couple of dogs with them, I think. And what happened was there was lots of noise in the forest, as you'd expect. There's birds singing. There's movement in the bushes from the little animals. Sunshine. It's warm. But it was getting dark. It was getting not getting dark. It was getting late. So it was sort of like late afternoon, maybe 4 or 5, but still sun in the sky. And they said all of a sudden everything changed. And this is another thing that happens to a lot of people in these experiences. Everything goes dead. The light really dims up too much for the time of day. The temperature gets really cold. And this is another thing that Skinwalkers can do. They can make your temperatures go really low or really high. And that's something as well that I quickly referenced to Ghost Adventurers when they did the Skinwalker Ranch, and the one after where they went to a possessed house on near the Skinwalker Valley, and they actually noted differences of like 50 degrees above and below, so there's massive changes. So back to the story. So the mother and daughter, and the daughter was like, oh my God, I can really feel this fear, this doesn't look right, this doesn't feel right. And she felt there was someone watching her. She didn't know, because her mum was ahead of her on the path. She didn't know what her mum was going through. And she said something to her mum like, are you okay? And her mother just turned around and goes, look, there's something really not right here. I feel there's someone watching us. The temperature doesn't feel, I feel cold. The light's gone down. And the daughter was like half relieved, like, well, at least I'm not the only one that's basically worrying about this sort of thing. Let's get out. So they continued onto the path knowing that it would get them out eventually. But what happened was, as they were walking out, they felt like not only was this thing watching them, but they could see big movements in the bushes, and they could hear real deep guttural growls, like from a very big being. And they walked faster, but it seemed like they were getting stuck into these vortices, because every time they were walking farther, the forest was just repeating itself. It looked like the same thing. Well, eventually they got out, and she really speaks about it. But that's almost like a scenario of, they normally go just for one person. When it's 2 or 3 people, they don't seem to want to know. And basically, yeah, that was really interesting, that story there. There was another thing I wanted to reference back to again, Ghost Adventurers. When they did an episode about a haunting in a house after the Skinwalker Ranch, they recorded a noise that is being made, and I don't know how to describe it. You know, one of those, I think it's a glockenspiel, I'm not really sure what you call it. It's the one where you scrape, you've got like a ridge piece of wood, and you've got a thin piece of wood, and when you scrape it down, you make a. Well, they recorded this sound, what was almost like it was made like going around, and it was a very strange sound. And I'm wondering, and obviously this couldn't be heard to the naked ear. This sound, they could only get an EVP of it and then run it on the computer, enhance it, and that sounded strange. And when the woman heard it, she said to them, she walked out of the room basically and started praying in her own bedroom, then came back to the guys, to Zach and I think it was Nick at the time, and Aaron and Bill. And when she went back, she said that sound that they made brought it all back. And I'm wondering if they use that sort of sound to maybe hypnotise their victims or something. So yeah, I've been really fascinated by this. So I wanted to make that clear that I believe Dogmen are like Sasquatch. They will not harm you if you're not too invasive in their ways and never pick up one of their pups. But if you're respectful for them, they will look after you. They'll be your friend, or at the very least they'll walk away. But you go in there with guns blazing, and I've heard even if you put a double barrel up to them and shoot them, it's not going to do much. But yeah, if you go out and actually go to harm them, then they will kill you. And I've heard that they will eat you all up, and I'm including your bones. There'll just be tiny fragments of your bones left. So they're like Sasquatch. Don't F with them, and they won't F with you. And I think that they're inherently good beings that are just misunderstood and probably feared as well. But really, if you actually get to know one, I reckon they'd be alright, like the Sasquatch. On the other side of it, we've got the story of the werewolves. I'm not really sure about the werewolves. I'm more inclined to think with werewolves, it's something more to do with like rabies, where someone gets bitten by a wolf and they get rabies, and they don't grow hair, but they do go wild and they do go a bit. And I'm more inclined to believe that side of it. But if there is werewolves, which there could be as well, because there has been sightings up north, then maybe what's happened is these skinwalkers have changed into the form of a coyote werewolf, sort of Dogman, a fake one, let's not forget that, and bitten someone, and in doing so have basically caused them to turn to werewolf, which I'm not really sure, again, if they do. I don't actually believe that would happen, and I'll tell you why. Because the reason that they can do this anyway is that these rejected Navajo shamans, they've learned these techniques as a kid, as children, because they were selected to do that, to be priests. So they know this anyway. So I'm kind of thinking the way a werewolf is created is through the mouth, but not through biting, but through word of mouth, through actually teaching. And I think that's how you get a werewolf. So in many respects, I actually believe that they're the same being, and that I think probably that werewolf that was spotted up in Hull, up in Yorkshire, I believe that could be directly to do with the Manchester deaths. Do you know what I mean? That was spotted at over 7 foot, and the photos looked convincing, and the witnesses were very convincing. And I'm hopeful that a lot of stuff will come out. But yeah, I just had to make this video about it. I would love to hear any of your comments or ideas about this, and I would love to further this and try and take it into another direction. Now, what I'm realising as well is I've got some connections here with experts. I mean, for me, Insane Disappearances and DMT66, they're presenters and they're narrators, and they're very good at what they do, and they brought me up a lot of information. But in many respects, the real experts in this are David Paulides and Victor Cundiff. But I think there's a missing link here. I think there's a triangle, because Victor Cundiff has said he's not actually an expert on skinwalkers. He's an expert on dogmen themselves and Sasquatch, whereas obviously David Paulides is expert on cases, bringing up cases, and obviously being an ex-policeman, he's also an expert at being a presenter and presenting these cases and bringing us the facts and investigating himself, which he has done a lot. But I'm now looking for I'm going to write this down. I'm going to make another video, part 2 to this. I'm going to try and look for, and again, if anyone can help me with this, I'm going to look for a skinwalker expert. So hopefully I'll have a new video coming soon about that. And again, I'd love to hear your comments. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. And I look forward to reading your comments. Thanks a lot. Bye.